Hello and welcome to our podcast. This is our STEM education podcast. My name is Rich Kingsford and I'm here with Chuck White, and we've been talking about STEM education and ways to make it more effective and take better care of our students. We're from chemvantage.org, which offers affordable, high quality LTI, homework, quiz, and assignment apps for general chemistry. Chuck, the topic today is assessments and designing feedback in a way that doesn't punish slow thinkers.
Yeah, assessment is probably one of the least favorite activities of most STEM teachers, especially, well, particularly me. I never really liked giving tests or assigning grades, but it's kind of a necessary part of the whole enterprise, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Unpleasant but necessary. So, so how do traditional time constrained assessments in STEM, maybe a 50-minute text test, uh, inherently disadvantage slow thinkers or students with high anxiety?
Well, I think the 50-minute test really creates a high anxiety environment for a lot of students. And, when time is short, anxiety spikes. Stress hormones directly impair the prefrontal cortex, and that's the region of our brain that's responsible for complex problem solving and spatial reasoning. So, uh, students have a cognitive overload in that kind of environment, and it really disadvantages students who are slow thinkers.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm thinking we've all had that feeling where you have to calculate kind of a meta test skill. You have to calculate, okay, there's this many questions and I have so much time and I can only take this test X number of times, and none of that, I'd call those test skills, and some of these future questions touch on them, but it doesn't help much with the content itself, with the thing we're trying to master.
Yeah, I made up a lot of 50-minute tests over the years, and um, I always tried to construct them so that students, in principle, could spend about 20 minutes writing out the solutions and 30 minutes thinking about it. Uh, and I figured, when I wrote out the answer key for the test, if I couldn't do it in 20 minutes, then the test was way too long.
I like that kind of a benchmark for yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
I when I first read this question, I agree that tests like that might be too much. They might disadvantage some students, but I'm not sure I'm crazy about the question kind of suggests, well, maybe we shouldn't be giving hard, stressful tests like this. And I'm not so sure that's the right takeaway about from this conversation. I'm thinking stressful scenarios and stressful things, it's life. It's I want the student to practice dealing with difficult problems and stressful problems. That's only part of me, though. The other part of me is a compassionate one, and maybe we need both.
Well, I agree with you that part of the process of going to college is preparing for life. And life is full of stressful situations. You can't always, coast through life um, on on easy street. There are lots and lots of times when you're going to be under great pressure, and one of the things that you have to learn as a college student is how to handle that pressure. The other thing is that uh, for purely practical reasons, most college courses are divided into 50 or 75-minute sessions. And If you don't conduct assessments in a controlled environment of a classroom, then you really don't know what you're testing because students have so many other resources available to them in other environments at home or whatever that uh, you just can't tell what's going on during an assessment.
Yeah. Oh, completely agree. I'm thinking those that structure, those constraints are really important. And if a slow thinker, if a student asked me, hey, I'm a slow thinker, I'm nervous for this test, the tough love part of me would say, great, I'm glad you're thinking about this, and here's some suggestions on how you can prepare for the test. I'm thinking some of these disadvantaged learners need to be aware that they're disadvantaged and they need to spend extra preparation time dealing with it. Just like in their life, with the future scenarios.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But in practical terms, I think the students who are in the bottom 10% of the class are the ones who are oftentimes least likely to put in the extra effort to do that.
Yeah, fair point. Moving on, what common assessment formats, or multiple choice, complex word problems, whatever, unintentionally measure speed or test taking skill rather than true conceptual mastery?
Well, you mentioned speed and test taking skill. I think speed is um, advantaged by complex word problems. If you have to spend a lot of time decoding a word problem and transforming it into a mathematical model and then solving that model, um, then complex word problems do disadvantage slow thinkers for sure. A lot of large classes use multiple choice tests because they're easy to grade. And multiple choice has its own problems because there are strategies for rapid elimination of um, distractors and wrong answers on multiple choice tests. And so if a student is good at those things, then they will be advantaged in taking a multiple choice test. If
Hmm.
a student is a deep thinker and focuses on edge cases and rare occurrences, then they're going to be disadvantaged by multiple choice tests because they have to consider 4 or 5 different scenarios for every question.
Yeah. Very interesting. It would be fun to do an experiment. I'm sure they've done experiments where you have a bunch of students who know absolutely nothing about the subject matter and see which ones are better at eliminating the distractor answers with multiple choice.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anything like that in your career?
No, it'd be interesting to have a test where students are um, challenged to find the weakest distractor in a
Yeah,
problem instead of the correct answer.
that would be fun. I like that. Good for STEM subjects too.
Yep, yep,
STEM, a really important part of STEM is knowing what's not the right answer, proving that something is false or demonstrating how something is not true. I
yep.
wish we focused more on that in academia.
That's the whole scientific method. It's based on falsification, right? You can't
Uh,
actually prove that a theory is true. All you can do is prove that individual hypotheses are false.
yeah, just wish our homework and maybe not all of them, but more assignments and tests were like that. That'd be fun. Be a twist, right? Some
Yeah, it
variety.
would. Yep.
So, how does a high stakes single attempt assessment structure contribute to the learned helplessness cycle we've talked about in some of our episodes?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about learned helplessness and cognitive overload in this podcast. And for single high stakes tests, If students get low scores on those, they tend to blame themselves. They attribute their failure to a lack of ability rather than a lack of preparedness or practice. And students internalize the belief that performance is driven by innate intelligence rather than strategy or effort. And it leads them to disengage completely from the process and results in a lack of confidence and self worth. So, yeah, this learned helplessness is something that is exacerbated by high stakes single attempt assessment structures.
Yeah. So that's a very safe answer. Let's make it a little more dangerous. Should should we, would you, Chuck, advocate that a good teacher never has a single attempt timed assessment? We should just abolish them
No, but what I made a practice of for many, many years is to make sure that if a student absolutely failed on a single attempt assessment, it didn't cause them to fail the course. So if you only had a course with one final exam, which was the total grade, then yeah, if a student
with a
fails, they
single
failed.
attempt.
They fail
Don't sign me
the
up for that
course.
class.
But typically in my classes, I would have the course divided into 1,000 points or so, and rarely would have more than 150 points for each midterm exam, and maybe 200 for a final exam. So at most, 15 or 20% of the grade would be in any single assessment. And so failure on any single assessment would not be fatal for the course.
I like that. I like that because you're there's you're not crushing anyone and you're not causing anyone's stress levels to skyrocket. And you're also giving the students an opportunity to prepare and take each individual assessment seriously. And if they're nervous about one in particular, great. Maybe there you can forewarn them. This where there's no retakes on this test. It's such and such, and you can give them, help them prepare for it, and help them plan and strategize. And I think there's some soft skills. Well, if I do that, I'm also opening the door for the student to learn some soft skills, which I believe are going to be ever more important in a world where AI is smarter than any human.
Yeah. Um, and if a student has a situation where even if they completely missed a midterm exam, it's 10% of their grade. They might get a C grade instead of a B grade for their final grade in the course. Um, but it's not fatal.
Yeah, I like it. Couple more. What is low stakes testing, and how can we use frequent formative assessments to lower the cognitive burden of major exams?
Well, I believe in formative assessments, and I think one of the best environments to do this is the online environment, because in a formative assessment, a student, depending on how it's structured, but I often structure my formative assessments in a way that students can keep at it for as long as they want, as long as they meet a certain deadline for the assignment. And they can get 100% if they just keep going long enough. So it's really to encourage practice and repeated interaction with the material. And that's the best way to learn. So I make formative assessments worth a relatively small number of points, but I let students work on them for an unlimited amount of time as long as they meet a final deadline. So I think this is one good way that you can help students who struggle. Um, uh, and summative assessments, midterm exams, they have their role in assessing performance in a course. But formative assessments, I think, are also very, very useful.
Yeah, and I'm thinking the two can complement each other too
Mhm.
with with a good strategy. Thank you. Interesting stuff. One more. How can we implement two-stage exams, individual followed by a group, to improve learning, reduce anxiety, and reward collaboration among struggling students?
Well, honestly, this is something I never did. Um, I understand the value of a two-stage exam where in the first stage you would have students complete an exam as an individual, and maybe that would constitute 75% of an exam score. And then in stage two, you would put students together in groups and they would solve the equations or the test again, and each earned as much as 25% of the total exam score in a group environment. But I never really had the time to do that. And There is a lot of time pressure in courses like general chemistry and most STEM courses. Um, Taking the time to work exams twice is just not realistic in many situations. However, I did do two-stage exams in reverse. And what I often did, at least in the last 10 years of my teaching general chemistry, is I would give students a practice exam, which was substantially similar to the in-class 50-minute exam that I would give them. I did this, and I would give them the practice exam about 4 days before the in-class exam.
Hmm.
The, there are a couple of reasons to do this. One is it gets them familiar with the format and um, gets them familiar with the level of difficulty on the questions that they can expect. So it was designed to reduce test anxiety. And secondly, if students did not do well on the practice exam, which was graded by computer, by the way, then it could signal them to go and study those uh, individual subjects in greater detail to prepare themselves for the real exam that came in class. Now, how do you get students to actually take the practice exam? If you just put it out there, many students won't use it. And unfortunately, the students who need it the most are oftentimes the ones who will not take advantage of the opportunity. So, what I did was I told them, okay, whatever score you get on the practice exam, and I let them, since it's computer graded, I let them take the practice exam as many times as they wanted. Whatever you score you get on that, I will take 10% of that score and add it to your in-class exam score. So uh, for a 100-point exam, students could earn as much as 10 extra points by just taking the practice exam and doing well on it. And that I found was modestly successful in getting students to prepare themselves for the exam. It's not quite a two-stage exam in the usual sense, but it's something that I did that did not take extra class time because they could do this at home, and it had the added benefit of reducing test anxiety to some extent.
Very interesting. I like the incentive you mentioned with the practice exam where some of it will count for the real one. Very interesting technique. I've never done that, nor have I done a two-stage exam, which is the definition here is assessments where students first complete a test individually, then immediately take the same or a similar test collaboratively in a group.
Mhm.
Which to me just sounds impractical and messy. And the freeloader problem, we're all familiar with the freeloader problem in groups where some students are disengaged and others, and sometimes they piggyback off of, or they rely completely on the engaged students. So yeah, I'm not crazy about the two-stage exam idea. Why not just have two totally separate assessments? But I like that practice exam concept you were talking about.
Well, don't discount the value of group work. I think group work has an important role to play in terms of socializing students with each other and encouraging peer instruction, not just for the student who is struggling and learning from their peers, but also for the peers who are faced with explaining something to their classmates.
Yep.
So I think you can't make this worth the majority of the points, or you get into the freeloader problem. But if you have it worth a small number of points, but non-zero number of points, then I think students will engage with it, and they will learn from each other. And I do think that's valuable.
Completely agree. Yeah, my goal, I'd call it participation. And my goal with my participation points in class was to make it so engaging and so interesting and, dare I say, fun, that the student they forget that they're in a class, right? They
That's
forget
right.
that they're doing this for points. Instead, they're just having a great time and they're engaging with the natural goodness the, of the subject matter. And obviously, that's easier in some subjects than other subjects. But I still like the goal that, just forget that you're preparing for a test. Just soak it in, soak in the natural, cool stuff that we're learning.
Very good.
Well, speaking of forgetting things, Chuck, I've almost forgotten that we're recording a podcast. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, this has been a great podcast. We've covered a lot of subjects about STEM education and chemistry education, and we focused most of our attention on the students who are struggling a bit in the bottom 10% of the class, and really focusing on techniques and things that we can do to help and encourage those students to be successful in our classes. That's something that a lot of STEM teachers, including myself, over the years, have not paid enough attention to. And it's been really interesting and fruitful for us to have this conversation. So thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. We are from chemvantage.org, which offers affordable, high quality LTI homework quizzes and assignments for general chemistry. Thanks for listening.